I'm in Delhi at the third DMAi. 2014 is the year, and there are lots and lots of interesting people attending this particular conference. And I'm here with one of them now. This is somebody who has an extraordinary background in direct marketing and who's currently involved in one of the leading and largest loyalty marketing companies in the world. I'll let him introduce yourself, and then we have a few good stories to share. So, Ajay.
Okay, do I need to talk into this or
Please do.
continue without that? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Ajay Row, and I'm responsible for what we call the proprietary loyalty business in AIMIA in India. AIMIA is one of the world's largest loyalty companies and leader in space, better known by its brand names than the company itself. So you might have heard of Nectar in the UK or Aeroplan in Canada, Air Miles in various parts of the world, and that's all us. We also do a bunch of loyalty programs for lots of people. And it's been a real pleasure interacting with Michael here in the DMAi sessions over the years, and good to be here.
And I feel the same way because we have a bit of a similar background. So I think you started out in direct marketing somehow. Could you tell us a little bit about, go back in time and tell us how...
Back to 1986,
1986.
when I was the only guy in marketing in one of India's largest companies, a company called ITC, which is a tobacco brand, but also had a big business in hotels. And I was the only guy in marketing who could write code. And sort of a little taken aback and said, "You can do what?" I said, "Well, I write code." You write code like it was a dirty word, right? I mean, it's sort of like admitting that you molest little children or something like that. It's terrible for a marketing guy to actually understand technology. So within about 6 months, they backed me off to create something they called the direct marketing cell, which was the first attempt at direct marketing in India. And they gave me a PC XT with a 10 MB hard disk, which was unheard of in those days. You actually had an XT rather than a PC, 4 PCs. And as luck would have it, telex machines, I don't know if you remember that, Michael. A bit before your time.
That's
Anyway,
before my time, yeah.
Yeah, so well, telex machines were dying. And the thing about a telex machine was a person would type at one end, and it would print at the other end of the telephone line, and somebody would read it and then type back. So telex operators were a very treasured bunch of very, very fast typists and very accurate typists because, it was real-time live and it was very expensive.
Yeah.
So you needed to be really quick and really accurate in what you typed. Since telexes were being replaced by faxes, they had these 4 telex operators. So I got them. And that was the start of the direct marketing sales. So a bunch of guys who could type very fast and accurately, and someone who knew how to write code. Armed with that, we set up a database, India's first database. Very exciting stuff. Here's the thing. So it took us about 6-8 months to pull together the database, and it was looking good. It was clean, it was nice, and we couldn't use it. We didn't have a budget. So I went back to the company and said, "Hey, we need a budget. We need to communicate to this database." And they said, "You want to do what?" Hey, you don't do communication. I mean, the guys who meet with the agency do communication. Direct marketing people don't do communication. I said, no, they do. You really can't have a database and not use it. They said, no, we've given you the PCXT, we've given you 4 guys, we've given you 4 other PCs, and now you want money in addition. And we said, we do need it. So I tried, I got buy-in from my boss, but that didn't mean very much, unfortunately, because my boss was also, now I realize at the time he seemed very senior, but I guess he was pretty junior in the organizational hierarchy at the time. So we went to the board to ask for money. And by that time, we'd started working with O&M Direct, which is now, of course, Ogilvy One. But in those days, it was still O&M Direct. And a chap called Sridhar, who used to run it here in India, said he'd give us a hand with the presentation, which he did. Unexpectedly, his boss, a gentleman called Mani Iyer, and Michael, you got to imagine this guy. He's tall, spare, shock of white hair, dark guy, always in a flannel suit, one of those light flannel suits and a thin tie, and a very thick Tamilian accent. And so Mani says he's going to join us for the meeting. Now, he was a legend in Indian advertising. I mean, he was the guy who ran O&M. He's the guy who made it, what it was, and he was really quite a guy. And he said he's going to come and help us with this presentation, which was unexpected. So we did the presentation, and I started. In those days, we had these acetates, which we put out on top of a projector. So you sort of put the acetates, you type them up, and it was the old manual typewriters, and you type up the acetate, and you put it on the projector, and then it was quite somewhat different from PowerPoint, really. And so I put up my first slide, and I think Mani wasn't convinced I was doing a very good job, and so he felt he should contribute. So he stood up. And I think you need to understand that the board of ITC in that time was very pakka. The Raj was alive and well in ITC in those days. And so Mani stood up and he looked up and down the board table and he said, having a direct marketing program without a budget for communication is like piddling in your pants in a cinema theater. You are getting a nice warm feeling, but nobody else is noticing. Afterward, it is cold and it is clammy. And here I was thinking, oh my God, that's not it. I'm getting banished to, whichever remote part of, India ITC does business, maybe up near Kargil, where, you get shot at by the Pakistani troops and militants or something terrible like that. And as luck would have it, a director lent to another director and said, he has a point, And the other director said, yes, let's give the boy a budget. And they actually gave us a budget. We got some mailers out the door. And Sridhar actually had a client, because it was a very theoretical client until then, because, we had all these plans, we want to do stuff, and a few months later they actually allowed us to create a loyalty program, which we launched, and this was back in 87, 88.
In the hotel industry?
In the hotel industry, and it was pretty revolutionary, because nobody done a loyalty program in India before, and if you think about it, I think American Airlines did theirs in what, 81?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, around there, 80, 81, thereabouts, so, and American Airlines was really the first miles points-based program, right? And Sheraton launched theirs, call it in 84, 83, 84. Yeah. And these are the days before the internet, when faxes were so expensive, you needed to get permission from your boss to send one, right? And you didn't really have any communication methodology. There was no email, right? And so figuring it all out, and we designed that program from scratch. And, it's pretty much the same program. Well, it was until about 2 years ago when they added the retail part of ITC to the program. But it was pretty much the same program for the first, call it 20, 22 years of its existence, which is kind of cool because, we had nothing. Yeah. We really designed it from scratch. And it worked pretty well because it helped me in many contexts where people said, oh, you're the guy who did that program. Okay, we don't need to interview you. Let's give you the job, which is kind of cool, right? You can't really complain. So, yeah, it was exciting times, I think, yeah.
But if we look back at that time, I think one thing is very interesting story, obviously, that you have from that first experience.
Thanks.
But I think there's one important element here, which is that you focused on building the database before you did anything else. How do you think this is working out today? What has been your experience working in India and elsewhere?
So my personal bias is always start with the data.
Yeah.
Right, start with the database, start with the data.
Yeah. And
then go from there. And, frankly, must have done, 30, 40,000 campaigns over the last 25, 27 years that I've been in the business.
Wow.
It would be a large number, right? And having analyzed, call it maybe half or two-thirds of that amount, and my brother is a creative guy and he's going to hate me for saying this, creative doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Yeah.
It's data, it's the offer, right? And that's really what drives it. You get your offer right, you get your data right, you get your controls and your analytics correct. Yeah. And the creative is kind of nice, and if you can say it well, you're probably going to pull a slightly better response rate. But if you've got the wrong database, you're going to kill yourself. Yeah. And I think one of the regrets that I have now is that, we almost went full circle, didn't we, where we worried more about the creative and the measurement of the data, the measures that we used tended to be more around creative, right? All my peers in the advertising fraternity think I've done something clever, and so therefore by definition it's great, and I get a raise. Yeah. Right, and that's really what it's about, as opposed to doing boring stuff like let's go and fix the database. Who wants to do that? Yeah. You meet the nice girls from the agency and get to meet with the even nicer looking models, and or you're going to meet guys like me who want to talk to you about regressions and databases and structures, and which one you got to pick, right? Yeah. You can't blame them. But I think we're now beginning to understand the value of data. But sometimes I wonder whether it's too little too late, at least in this country. I'll give you an example, Michael. SMS, for example, has been throttled by the government of India because I think as marketers, we use it indiscriminately.
Yeah.
We didn't worry about the data. We just got people bombarded with SMSs, right? And the government came down and said, you can't do that anymore. We're sorry.
Yeah.
Outbound telemarketing, the same thing. Now, if we don't get our act together with email marketing, I fear that that might happen.
Absolutely.
With that as well, right? And it's a bit that, people talk about a 2% response rate, right? Or a 3% response rate. Gee, I'm really bright, aren't I? Yeah, but you know what? You got a 97% non-response rate.
That's so well said.
Right? And if you analyze your database for non-respondent, right? So you look for the non-respondent in the database, swap them out.
Yeah.
Two things happen. You cut your costs incredibly, which is kind of cool. And, you get better data because, 97% of your database is a bigger number than 3% of your database.
Yeah.
Right? So you're going to get more accurate data, which is kind of cool. So all that good stuff on the one side. But the other thing which happens is really, which I think is far, far more important, you don't educate the bulk of your database to ignore you. Right? Because what you're doing is, if you're doing a 97% non-response, right, you're teaching 97 people out of 100 that what I've got to say is of no interest to you.
Yeah.
And that's not a good thing to do.
No, I think that's very well said, and I think that's a general problem. Just want to come back on two of the things that you said. So if I understand it correctly, what you're saying is if you had, let's say, 100% equates the full success of a campaign, and you have three main components: creative, the offer/message, and the target audience. So I think what you're saying is that creativity accounts only for what, in your opinion, 5, 10, 20%?
Well, by and large, it's irrelevant. So, if you say on the overall response rate, 5%, so if you've got a 2% response, but 5% of that maybe. But having said that, there have been instances where creativity really made the difference. Right?
Naturally.
But those are rare and far between. So I don't want to completely discount those, but that's maybe 1 in 50 or 1 in 100 campaigns, really. Give you an example of that. I used to work with the Mauritius government's tourist office, right? And our client there was one of the most incredible people I've ever met, really. Incredible fellow. And so we were in Mauritius, this creative director, a chap called Alok Nanda, another really exceptional human being, and myself. And we were selling a series of ads to the Director General of Mauritius Government Tourist Office, right? And now you need to understand, Mauritius hadn't discovered tourism as much as it did later at that time. We were still very prelim. But it must be said also that Mauritius changed the way destinations are marketed. And I think a lot of it was because of what we did. And let me tell you a bit about this one story, and then maybe at another time about what we did for Mauritius. An interesting saga there. So this story, what happens is the creative guy, Alok, has presented 24 ads. Now, Michael, we don't have the money to run more than 5 ads to get 24. But there's a 25th ad. And Alok puts it out and says, this is it. And Cyril, our client, the Director General of the Tourism Department, says, oh, but Alok, I don't understand it. I don't get it. And Alok said, no, this is it. And Cyril says, but no, I can't, I don't get it. That's it. And, at this time, I'm getting really impatient. I'm kicking Alok under the table. It's a glass table. And I'm kicking him underneath it. Shut up! Let's go! We can't run more than 4 or 5. Will you stop it already? We've got time. We'll hit the beach. We'll do the casino. We'll get back on the flight. We'll be home. Will you stop it? Yeah. Right? And Alok, no, this is it. So, aren't you listening to me? This is it. And then finally, after about 45 minutes, and we're getting closer and closer to our flight timing, Cyril says, okay, you're the creative guy. I mean, it's your word versus my word. We go. Right. Here's the thing, Michael. That ad, right, outpulled every other ad in that campaign because Alok insisted we run it first, and then, just to satisfy my curiosity around the other ones, but it outpulled by a factor of 20. I mean, there was no comparison. And like Cyril, I just didn't get that ad. But clearly the consumer did. And, the genius of the creative guy to see that. Yeah. Right? So there is that as well, which happens sometimes. Right? But, the bulk, it doesn't really make a difference, does it? I mean, it's sort of, it's a nice to have, it's not a need to have. The offer and the database are the need to have. Yeah. So
why do you think that knowing that, and some of us have known that for a very long time, and we probably learned from our own mistakes, we didn't put enough emphasis into the database and so on. So why is it, in spite of everything you're saying, still don't get it? Why aren't people focusing on that? And given the technology,
You want the honest answer? You want the polite answer?
Is the honest answer that they don't?
It's boring.
It's boring. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's boring.
Yeah.
And it's so much more fun to go and discuss whether the drop of water should be in the left nostril of the beautiful model or the right nostril, whether our brand colors come out, and is that really the ethos of the brand, as opposed to let's worry about how we're going to run tagging of the database and cross tabs on that, and get something which is meaningful, which will create a regression, which come on, which one's giving you the migraine, right? I mean, so I think it's boring, and because it's complex, and not everybody who's in communication is necessarily, though that's changing now with the new generation, is necessarily somebody who understands IT, right? Certainly, call it 25 years ago. I mean, the guy who understood IT wasn't the guy who understood communication, right? They were chalk and cheese, weren't they?
Yeah.
And so it's not your comfort zone. So now going and figuring out the way the data works. The guys who do this well, though, who do both the communication and the data well, are inevitably the entrepreneurs who run it as a business.
Yeah.
And I think when it's in your own money at stake, then you suddenly start to care deeply about the database, don't you?
Yeah.
As opposed to when you're giving somebody advice, and it's well-meant advice, and you mean it well, but you talk about what you know about, which tends to be creative
The other
and
side.
communication, which is the that part of it, rather than the database and the offer, because and sorry.
Yeah, but that's no. But just for this session and sort of the last question, and if you look at this whole these last 30 years, where, as you said, technology has evolved, direct marketing has evolved, but it's almost like it's disappearing because it was not sexy for people to work in direct marketing, and when digital came along, it was not just part of the direct marketing mix, it was positioned as something completely new. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, call me old-fashioned. No difference.
Old-fashioned.
There you go. No difference. No difference at all. Digital is it's nothing. It's direct marketing in a new way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of things which you never dreamt possible.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the instant response, for example. The ability to guide me into different offers, drive me to different landing pages. I mean, all that cool stuff which we couldn't really. We'd love to have done in direct marketing. It wasn't really practical, was it?
Yeah.
And now, for example, so we've got a banking client for whom we do 4 or 5 million emails once a month, and every one of them is unique.
Yeah.
Because you served offers which I know you're going to rank.
Yeah.
And what we're driving is open rates, click-through rates of upwards of 70 and 80%, right? Which is kind of cool. And the reason why you can do that is because you're giving people the knowledge that when you open this, you're going to get something that you want.
Yeah.
So what I get is different from what Michael gets, and vice versa, right? And Michael gets what he wants, I get what I want, when I want it, as far as we can.
Yeah.
Now, that's sort of taking direct marketing to logical extent. Technology has allowed that, but equally technology, when you move from my 10 MB hard disk to the terabytes of data that we now have, has enabled a change in data as well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
The ability to run a chi-square in the old days, I used to have to write my own chi-square routines, right? O minus E squared divided by E squared greater than the chi-square, right? I mean, you remember the old, to find out if something is significant or not. Now, it's automatic, it's automated, and you just run it. You don't even need SAS, you do it in Excel, and it works perfectly all right for smaller databases. So what I'm trying to get at is a lot of it has got easier, but don't let the ease fool you. It's still the same principles. It's just how you exploit the same principles using new tools, right? And that's really what it's about. So to my mind, I just see it as a continuum. And it's going to continue going down that continuum, right? It's not going to stop with email. There'll be the next new thing, right? And that's going to happen, and then there'll be the next new thing, but the principles will remain the same. Data, offer, communication, the three interlinked will remain the same, at least I would assume in my lifetime, which, I understand there's not a lot of that left, but still,
there is a lot left, I'm sure. But thanks a lot for sharing those thoughts. So here's Michael Leander saying thank you for watching. If you want to know more about what we talked about, or AIMIA for that matter, or you, then there should be some links somewhere here. Just go ahead and follow them. And then I just want to say thank you for watching. Don't forget to share. Wishing you a great day today and all the other days.